All right, we are live, folks. We'll give people a minute to log in, to get comfy, to buckle up, because this week is my favorite week of the four weeks that we're doing here. The title of today: How to Actually Read and Dealing with Main Idea Questions. I could teach a whole course on how to actually read, and I think it would change people's lives. And today, I hope we change some lives as I talk about the essentials behind reading for standardized tests. So if you are live on the stream, drop in the chat where you're calling in from. I like to know who's in the room live. If you're watching a recording of this, obviously that feature is not going to work. But let me just set an intention for us today, and I'll ask you to clear your current workspace of any distractions. I'm actually going to take my phone, I'm going to toss it over so it's not within arm's reach, it's not tempting, because today's session requires intense focus. And really, the reading section of any standardized test is the one that I think people are most likely to get distracted on. People start reading about rocks for the 20th time, and they're like, oh, another rocks passage, and they start thinking about their plans for the weekend. And if you can train your attention, and if you are a terrible reader, as someone just shared in the chat, thank you for your honesty. I'm going to give you some tools today that took me decades, almost 2 decades. I've been doing this 18 years to cultivate, that I think will help you immediately. I don't think going from being a terrible reader to being a very good reader can happen like that. And I'm going to show that to you today. What can you do today to become a very good reader? Now, I'm not going to overpromise. I'm not going to say you're going to go from 400 to 800 like that. Getting an 800 on these tests requires reading a lot of stuff over a long period of time and building your vocabulary. But can you see a jump of 100, 150, 200 points just by doing the things I'm going to show you today? Absolutely. I've seen it. It's what I do. It's why I'm one of the top private tutors in the world. People fly me all over the world to teach them exactly what I'm going to show you today. So shall we dive in? Let's dive in. Still a touch sick from last week, but I'm feeling mostly better. Okay, so let's dive in. I prepared a couple of things for you guys. So this is from my reading course, which I sell online. I'm just going to show you guys part of the course and how I help people become better at reading. And the first thing I like to do is I'm going to pull up a text from a standardized test in just a second. I invite you to notice what happens. Don't worry, I'm not going to score you. I'm not going to shame you. I just want you to notice what happens as you read this paragraph from a standardized test. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, another 5 seconds. And I want you to be honest with yourself. Did any of these thoughts come up for you in the last 25 seconds? What am I doing tonight? Who cares about college anyway? Nerd alert, who cares about hydrogeology? And if you did, if some of these thoughts popped up for you, that's okay. We just have to label it as bad reading. It's bad reading. And from some of the comments I'm seeing in the chat, some of you are prone to being bad readers. I'm not saying you are a bad reader, just in moments you have been bad at reading. I have too, full disclosure. Sometimes I get bored and I think about these things and it's not helpful. That's bad reading. That is what bad reading looks like. And by the way, this passage, yeah, this is about the length of an SAT passage. I took this from a test called the GRE. So this, I think, is even harder than what you might see on the digital SAT. And I chose it because I thought it might be challenging and it might be a really good place to start with people who are having trouble staying, keeping their attention. And here's another example. And, to do well on these tests, you have to be able to read texts and answer questions about them, no matter how boring the text is. Again, this is from a GRE. It's not actually from the digital SAT. We'll look at digital SAT questions in a second. So what's the alternative to being a bad reader, getting frustrated, having to join Dan Lerman and Huzaifa's online course and show up at whatever time to hear a lecture? What's the alternative to that? The alternative is obviously being a good reader. There are some specific things you can do with your mind to help you read well. And this is my life's work, guys. I have a PhD in cognitive science in education. Cognitive science is like the science of your thoughts. What thoughts are helpful for you when you read a passage about hydrogeology? I'll give you a hint. I hate this test is not one of them. What am I doing tonight is not one of them. What thoughts are helpful? And I'm going to give you 5 tools, cognitive tools, things you can actually do in the moment where you feel frustrated or you're not engaged or you're bored, things you can actually do that will increase your comprehension, increase your score. And this one might shock some of you. It's actually going to increase your enjoyment of the test, of what you're doing. I'm not messing with you guys. I enjoy taking these tests. I enjoy it because I'm having an experience. More on that in a little bit. So I want you to entertain that possibility. What would it look like if I not only understood more, but actually had a little bit of fun? Now, I'm not talking about the best party you've ever been to fun, but had like the type of fun you get when you're doing a crossword puzzle. That kind of fun is available for you. And here's the thesis, my main idea that I want to get across to you today, wherever you are in the world. Good readers have an experience. Good readers have an experience. What does that mean? It means when I read that line about hydrogeology, I don't go to dark places or dark thoughts. I instead maybe put myself in Iceland, where I went in the year 2012 on this amazing school trip. And I think about these like magma rocks and what they felt like. And I have an experience when I'm reading. It took me a while to figure this out. I actually surveyed a lot of people who got great scores on these tests. I said, what's the experience of reading like for you? And this is basically how I sum it up. So how can you force yourself to have an experience, especially if, like many people your age right now, you're not doing a ton of reading. You're spending a lot of time, a lot of your free time doing other things besides reading, right? And before I start giving you the tools, I just want to point out, like, if you're in this room, most of you are probably not reading full books, which is that could be up to like a 10-hour commitment. And even if you are reading full books, you're probably not reading mind-expanding, challenging books. Otherwise, you'd be scoring really high on these tests and you wouldn't need my help. That's okay. If you're not reading books, or if the books you're reading are like Harry Potter, which I love Harry Potter, it's just not going to really grow your brain. You don't have to start at the top. A lot of tutors, a lot of teachers make it sound so simple. Oh yeah, just go read these 10 books and then you'll be smart. And man, that's a huge time commitment, especially nowadays when kids are busier than ever. They have more going on. They have more distractions. You don't have to start at the top. So take a moment. I made this up. It's called Dan Lerman's Pyramid of Reading. Where are you on this list? Have you tried? I mean, most of us have read sentences. Have you tried poetry? Have you tried short stories? Have you tried articles? And have you tried books? And the key here is whatever you're reading, to get good at these tests, it has to be high quality text. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but you can make your way up this pyramid one step at a time. So if you've read some short stories, but not articles yet, think about how you might get to the next level. In our school community, if you haven't joined it, you should. It's free. All the resources I'm talking about are in there. I've posted a really good list of all of the I haven't posted, I don't think I posted good sentences, but good poems, good short stories, good articles, good books that will expand your brain as you read them. They're written with complex language. They're good practice for the digital SAT. So go ahead and check the school community for that list. Okay, back to the toolkit. And this course that I'm giving you a taste of today is broken up into chapters. And the first tool I want to give you is called world making. And what is world making? It is taking words and creating worlds out of them and spending a moment or two hanging out in that world. So seeing the sights, hearing the sounds, tasting the taste, using your senses to hang out in that world. Right? This idea is called world making. So what is this? If you're taking notes today or taking screenshots, world making is creating a world using all of your senses and then hanging out in that world for a couple of seconds. This helps you have an experience. We'll look at some examples of this in a second, but just think about the possibilities of this. Using your imagination, your own internal experience to take words and have an experience. It's kind of magical, guys, and it's what reading is all about. Good readers have an experience. So I'll give you an example. Here's a sentence. The old man took the handful of dust and sifted it through his fingers. Rather than just moving on and being like, okay, that's, the way our brains tend to do, take a moment to turn this into a movie. You are the director of this movie. There are no wrong answers. Maybe answer some of these questions. What does the old man look like? What is he wearing? Where is he? What color is the sand? What do you hear, smell, feel? I'm going to give you 20 seconds to actually do this. And I'd love to see some shares in the chat if you want to type up for me. What does the old man look like? Is he like Dumbledore from Harry Potter? Harry Potter's on my mind now. Is he wearing a robe? Is he in the attic of Hogwarts? Is the sand magical blue? Do you hear a grandfather clock in the background? Does it smell like an attic? Is it cold because it's December? Like, all of these things allow you to have an experience. And guess what? I just had one out loud for you guys, and it was fun. It was enjoyable. I liked going into, in my imagination, the attic of Hogwarts and seeing this scene, feeling this scene, hearing this scene. Now, in the back of your mind, you're probably like, wow, Dan, this takes a long time. And at first, you're probably right. If you're not used to reading, it could take a long time. But you can get to a point where you just do this naturally. Like, at the pace you read, you're having this full experience. It probably takes a little bit of practice. It does take a little bit of practice. One of the most damaging thoughts you can have right now to your development as a reader and as a test taker is, I have to go quickly. No, eventually you do. But if you haven't been reading, if you're scoring an 830 on the SAT, you are almost certainly going too quickly, and you're definitely not having an experience. You are not having at least the experience the author intended you to, otherwise your score would be higher. So I encourage you today to just slow it down, to try and have an experience with me as I show you these tools to help you become a good reader. There's no shortcut here, guys. I'm a very efficient person. I get paid a lot of money per hour because of my efficiencies. When it comes to reading, the only way to do it is to slow down and work on your tools before you get fast and put it all together. That tool, folks, that first tool is world making. Good. Before we move on, I'll give you an opportunity to practice world making, and I'll come back and look at some of the questions you dropped in the chat. I'm going to ask you to pick two of these and really have an experience. If you'd like to share with me what your movie, what your world is like, go ahead and put it in the chat. I always love hearing about it. But here are 5 examples. Pick 2 of them and have an experience with these and see if you can enjoy yourself. I'll put a minute on the clock. Take another 30 seconds. If you're not on your second one, do it now. Have an experience. Create the world. Hang out in that world. Enjoy it. Okay, good. So I have these pretty janky images that we're going to build on. My image that yes, hard to believe, but I did this myself. My image for world making is creating this world and hanging out in it. I want to respond to a couple of the things in the chat before we move on. I think there's some good stuff in here. Ruzali, my biggest thing with reading passages that I often misread and misinterpret the passages. Let me rephrase that for you, Ruzali. And this is all coming from a place of love, but I get paid. In this case, I'm not getting paid, but I generally get paid to tell people the truth, whether they like it or not. You are just rephrasing the fact that you're not a good reader yet. You're not a good reader yet. The whole point of reading is to not misread and not misinterpret, to connect. And it's okay. Like a lot of people in this room and a lot of people in the world are not good readers yet. If you call that out and are just like, you know what, since I spend most of my time reading comics and not stuff with complicated words, I haven't developed that muscle yet, then you could start to fix it. Comic books are not getting you the score you want on your SAT. Reading Walt Whitman might. Reading David Foster Wallace might. Yeah. Good. So if there's anything else like you wanted to ask about your particular situation, drop it in the chat. I love the participation, folks. This is really cool. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving. I'm going to keep giving you some tools. Okay. So beyond world making, what else can you do? Move 2, I call personalizing. And personalizing is applying your own experience to what you're reading. And this is such a useful move because we're all the main character in our own movies, right? Like if I start telling you about someone you have a crush on in your life, you're automatically tuned in. You're not gonna, you're in no danger in that situation of losing focus. So the idea is you apply what's going on in your life or your memories to the text. So for example, here's famous poet Emily Dickinson. I felt a funeral in my brain. And as I'm world making for that, I'm actually picturing a funeral. My cousin Irvin died maybe 8 years ago. I was there and I remember the hilly lawn in New Jersey and what it was like that day. It was really sunny, really hot, and I'm visualizing myself there. And that's personalizing. You guys weren't at my cousin Irvin's funeral. I was. And I'm using that to fuel my attention and to draw me in. So I invite you to do the same thing. Now, notice, I'll give you these 3 examples. I don't know that you've been on boats. I don't know what's going to happen for you. I can't give you the answer to personalizing. My tip is read one of these or all of them and try to just see what pops up from your memory, from your image bank. I'll give you 30 seconds to try and personalize one of these. So what do these remind you of? And for me, I'll go with this last one. I love this line. It's I think it's the last line of what's considered by many the great American novel, The Great Gatsby. So we beat on boats against the current. What that reminds me of is this camp I went to growing up in Long Island where we took boats out every once in a while. I was on the north side of Long Island. I could see this like 4-person boat with like red paint on the side. And I'm thinking about it, boats going against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. That boat is trying to go upstream and getting pushed back. Now, that scene never really happened, but that's considered personalizing because I remember that red boat from my childhood and it does something to me. It draws me in. So the more you can do this, the more you can personalize, the easier the read is going to be and the more fun you're going to have. So what does personalizing look like visually? It's bringing it back to you, your experiences, your emotions, your life. That's personalizing. Cool. Okay, so what are the other tools? These are a bit more tactical, but let me just pause for a second one more time before we dive into these 3 tools. If you just do these 2 things, guys, just these 2, you're immediately a much better reader. If you're world making and personalizing, the other stuff's tactical. You know, there's some tactical moves that'll help you when you get to fancy words and stuff like that. But if you just do these 2 things, I think reading is going to come much easier to you guys. I know it will. I've been doing this a long time. It makes reading easier for everyone. If you're an advanced reader, I bet there's some of those in here. You probably do these some or even most of the time. I find by naming it, by saying world making, by saying personalizing, you can start going towards doing it all of the time, which is how you get elite scores on this test. Good. I'm seeing some questions here. The truth hurts you, Ruzali. Yeah, that's what I'm here to do. And you know it comes from a place of love. And I hope, this class is mine and Huzaifa's gift to you guys. It's really coming from a place of trying to help you. And you can't be in denial. You can't be in denial and improve as well. You got to call it out. So I don't mean to hurt you out of spite, Rosali, but I hope it helps you get somewhere. Yeah, Franco asked, do you have any tips? In my case, I tend to overthink all of the passages in the test because I get so used to questioning everything. I would guess, Franco, that is your anxiety popping up in strange ways. It happens all of the time to all of us. But if you're over questioning something and you don't have confidence in your ability to read, I mean, where does confidence come from? That's a good question. I'd say, Franco, what are you confident in? You know, I always come back to ping pong. I'm a very confident and very good ping pong player. I think about this a lot. And it's because I've put in my reps. I've played thousands of hours of ping pong. I'm not worried I'm going to serve it into the net because I've practiced so much. I wonder, Franco, if you're specifically overthinking on reading, if you just haven't read enough yet. That would be my guess. But if you want to throw some more info in the chat, I can maybe answer that question at a better level, or maybe I'm right. Okay, cool. All right, let's get back to this. So, okay, parsing. So 3 more moves to round out what I call the reading toolkit. You'll leave here today with 5 moves to make yourself a better reader. I call it the reading toolkit. So parsing means taking things down, taking like complicated, long, big tasks and breaking them down into smaller chunks. Maybe I should call it chunking. Although in cognitive science, that means something slightly different. But I like the term chunking because I read this sentence, guys, it's actually a beautiful sentence. And my first read is like, whoa, what the hell is he talking about? Right? So what do I do? And I know some people in here are familiar with that feeling of like, oh, what the hell's going on? Good readers reread. They have to. They don't get everything the first time. Good readers reread. And when they do, they break things down into smaller chunks. So I'd look at this and I'd say, until the lions have their own historians. Just look at that first part. Until the lions have their own historians, so I'm envisioning a world of like a lion historian. The lion's got like plastic frame glasses on. He's got a chalkboard, like holding a like one of those pointers, and it says history on the chalkboard. That's kind of a funny thought. So until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt. So I'm thinking back about, like, maybe it's in black and white, and I'm thinking about humans hunting lions. That's probably what's going on here. Will always glorify the hunter. Ooh, so in this black and white image, I'm thinking about a human, kind of a nasty sight that's popping up for me, holding up a lion head and like standing up on a podium while people clap. Wow. That was parsing, because I broke it down into smaller pieces until I went on this little journey and had the experience. And this is a particularly useful tool when you're dealing with hard, long, complicated text, which the digital SAT is full of. So here are 3 really tricky sentences. Again, I like starting at the bottom of the pyramid. Until you can read a sentence really well, you've no shot at reading short stories, articles, books. Try one of these. It should feel challenging the first time you read it. Go back and break it down into smaller pieces and see if that helps. Take 1 minute to do that. Okay, good. And I'm noticing in the chat, someone said the last line I read became dark really quickly. That's great. That if you felt the darkness, you went along for the journey that the author was putting out. And not everything you're going to read is rosy. On the digital SAT, there's passages about slavery and repression. Things get a little dark, right? Hopefully it doesn't send you into a spiral of depression. That would not be good. But your task is to take it in and feel it, even for a moment. So I love, it was Sand who said that. You're reading now, right? Or you're at least following me reading, which is exactly what we want. Let's read. I'll pick a more positive one here. You have to live spherically. Okay, I'm envisioning myself living in a bubble. Like, how about I am a bubble? Dan Lerman is a bubble in many directions, and the bubble's getting bigger. Notice I'm parsing. I'm just going one step at a time. Never lose your childish enthusiasm. Okay, so bubble Dan Lerman is smiling and jumping up and down and dancing. And things will come your way. Now I'm envisioning money, like dollar bills coming towards the Dan Lerman bubble that's dancing. It's insane, guys. It's weird reading, and it's weird. Like that Dan Lerman bubble, I've never done that before, but you can tell I'm having an experience. I keep coming back to that point, and really these tools I'm giving you guys are just techniques for you to have an experience. So that is parsing, taking big things, breaking them down into smaller chunks. I might rename this chunking at some point in the future. I like that name better. Parsing sounds so intellectual. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I just made that decision. Okay, so for now, parsing, big piece, breaking it down into smaller pieces. There's my little image for it. Okay, what else can you do? Let's talk about defining. This is such an important tool for those of you who don't have the best vocabulary, even for the people who do. But you know by now, if you've kept up with this course and you're taking the digital SAT, there's some tricky words on it. And the point of defining is when you get to a tricky word, you have to guess. You have to guess what the word means. So here's an example. I'll actually give you a couple of examples. This is a hard one, actually. Why don't we start with this one, where I've removed the word. So many people get to a word they don't know. They throw their hands up and they say, I don't know. I have no idea what that means. But notice your ability to read the sentence and at least take a guess about what this means. So what would you guess this XXXXX word is? I think it starts up front. What does the word epics mean? Maybe you don't know what epics is, but if in earlier blanks of history, I guess like blocks of history, epic has to be like a chunk of history. We find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a blank of social rank. I would say like a hierarchy would be my guess, like a pyramid of social rank, something like that. And here is your turn to do it. These are made up words. I've made up these words. They're not real. Um, your task is to guess what they mean. And they're from famous books. So take a minute. You could try all through them. It goes from easy to medium to hard. See if you can guess what the words in caps, which are not real words, what they mean. Good. And if I'm reading carefully for this first one, maybe I'm guessing like nice or kind here based on the text, even though this is a made up word. For this second one, maybe like disgusting or scary or gross. And for this third one, my three buddies, friends, homies, Tim being really dim. We said making up our mind, like you make up your minds would be my guess. And notice these are not fancy words. I don't need when I define to come up with it's in fact, it's the opposite. I want to come up with basic words that I understand. So here are the actual words. Cordial. That's kind of a fancy word that just means like nice, kind, polite. Verminous, fancy word that means disgusting. And I love this book, A Clockwork Orange, also kind of a dark movie for the film people out there, but one of my favorite books because Anthony Burgess, the author, he literally made up a language. He called it Nadsat. He made up a language and uses that language in writing the book. So he actually challenges you to figure out what these words mean based on context. And for the really strong readers out there, I think this is a really excellent read, really expands the mind. Cool. So what is defining? It's taking some words, some letters, words you don't know. Maybe you've never seen them before and guessing about what they mean. That's defining. Okay, last tool, linking. Linking, I think, do I have a definition for it on here? I guess let me start with what it is. It's taking pronouns and transition words and tying them back to their source. Taking pronouns and transition words and tying them back to the source. This is a really hard sentence. I can't remember if I took this from a real text or maybe I used ChatGPT. It's hard though. And my task for you all is to read this. And for anytime you get to a pronoun like his or he or its, think about what it refers back to. That's called linking. So take a minute to do that. Okay. And then so I'm reading this and I'm, world making, I'm personalizing, I'm visualizing this little town in what sounds like England. It's bleak winter's evening. I'm thinking about how gray the sky is. And I'm seeing these two guys, Mr. Worthington and Master Charlesworth. And I actually don't, this first his, it's kind of unclear. Is it Worthington? Is it Charlesworth? Who proposed the parish festivities? I don't know. Yet I still don't know about the he, but it's has to refer back to the proposal for what sounds like a party. So it's refers back to the proposal. The lad has to refer back to Master Charlesworth because it's Mr. Worthington saying it. And so on and so forth. So the point is, anytime you get to a pronoun, you at least have to take a guess. Again, it's kind of vague in this one, which I think makes it hard. But when you see a pronoun, you need to tie it back to its source. Here's an old SAT passage. I like showing this one because it says they, it says wait, is this class? Like there's so many pronouns in here that all refer back to Americans, which aren't mentioned since line 2. So they mention the American people, and then the rest of this, there's pronouns that tie all the way back there. And people get lost on this because they don't know what the pronouns are talking about. So that idea is called linking. So taking pronouns, tying them back. So what is the reading toolkit, guys? Here are the 5 moves. And my point is very simple. If you can do these 5 at a high level, you immediately become a very good reader. You immediately become a very good reader. So these are the 5 things I encourage you to do as we look at some poetry, as we look at some digital SAT passages the rest of the day. And I'll model this for you guys. Here are the words. And if you want to take a screenshot or write these down, now's a good time. World making, personalizing, parsing, linking, and defining. Okay, so let's see what it looks like to use all of these on a real text. Here's a great poem. This is step 2 on the Dan Lerman pyramid. It's short. It's actually probably the most famous poem, maybe of all time. It's called The Road Not Taken. I'll read part of it and I'll demonstrate for you guys the tools. I think I'll probably use all 5 of the tools as I read this. Okay. So taking a moment to get in the zone. In fact, I want to blow my nose real quick because I'm a little congested. And then when I come back, I'll use all 5 tools. Give me one sec. Okay, I'm back. All right, so just taking a moment to get in the zone. When you're reading, if you've watched my live walkthrough of Digital SAT Test 6, it's live on the Scalar YouTube channel, you'll notice how often I'm resetting, I'm taking breaths, I'm feeding my brain, I'm taking my time. It's the only way I know how to do this. And anyone I know who scores really highly on the verbal section does the same thing. So I'm just taking a moment to get in the zone. And now let's read. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. My brain's automatically doing it. Let me try and share with you guys. I'm visualizing myself at a junction where there are 2 roads kind of slanted, one in each direction. And where I am is called Christopher Morley Park. It's a park I grew up going to in Long Island. And I'm visualizing a bunch of trees that are yellow. And that kind of makes me feel like it's a little crisp in the air. I could see my breath. I'm with my dog. And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Notice in poetry, guys, I think many of you know this, but the idea ends at the punctuation, not at the line. So, and sorry, I could not travel both and be one traveler. So I'm like slouched over and I'm scratching my head because I can't take both paths. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So I'm envisioning myself looking down the right road, kind of trying to angle it and see how far down the road I can see until it bends around the corner, because there's a lot of like plants around there. I'll do one more and then I'll pause for any questions, comments, concerns. Okay, then took the other, and the other is the equivalent of a pronoun here. The other what? It's the other road. So instead of going to the right, I actually go to the left as just as fair. So I guess the road is just as pretty. Fair can mean kind of like pretty or nice or beautiful. And having perhaps the better claim. That's weird kind of poetry talk, but I guess The other road maybe is a little more attractive. Now I'm envisioning it being a little lighter because it was grassy and wanted wear. Okay, now I'm envisioning the left road is full of grass. The one on the right was full of gravel. The one on the left full of grass and untouched, wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. Okay, now this is a little confusing because it's saying the passing there had warned that. Okay, so both roads are kind of equally worn, which is kind of different from what he said before, but I don't know. I'm along for the journey. I'm not thinking too much about what that means. I'm just trying to world make and feel like this decision between the two. You'll notice I'm using all of these tools, and I'll just fast forward till the end. This is the super famous line. I took the one, this refers back to the road. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So this is really good poetry. People who know way more about reading and poetry than I do call this one of the great poems of all time. And I hope you start to see how the reading toolkit can let me connect and have that experience even with poetry, which I think if you can read poetry, I think the SAT is pretty easy for you. I think that's the hardest reading, you can have. Okay, so I'll pause for a second. And any questions, comments, concerns about the reading toolkit before we move on to the section of today's class where I open up a digital SAT and actually do some questions. Okay, cool. We got some Valdrin saying, I watched 2 of these verbal videos before the August SAT and added 40 points, was already to 690. Hey, Valdrin, congrats. You're getting monster scores. That's awesome. Glad it was helpful. Cool. Any other questions, comments, concerns? State them now. Otherwise, I'm going to pull up some slides of real digital SAT questions. All right. Okay. So check it out. Let's apply everything we've just been doing to passages from the digital SAT. And we're going to start with what I think are the most straightforward reading questions. Next week, we'll cover the other question types, main idea questions. So let's start right here from Blue Book Test 1. If you're keeping up with this course, maybe you've done this one before. Let's do it right this time. This is a pretty challenging one. And I'll just take you through my thought process doing this, and then I'll let you guys loose and you'll get to do a couple and see how it comes. So first thing when I'm dealing with a reading question, I look at the question itself. Which choice best states the main purpose of the text? There's all sorts, I think there's 5 or 6, depending on how you classify it, 5-ish different types of reading questions. Sometimes they ask for the function. Sometimes they ask for you to find supporting evidence, so on and so forth. The main purpose one is obviously just asking about the vibe, like what happened in the text. And I've kind of primed my brain now to think, all right, main purpose. Okay, let's start by reading the intro. So many people fast forward through the intro, and it is so important to read the intro to the text at the same intensity as you're reading the text itself. Let me show you what I mean. The following text is from Maggie Pogue Johnson's 1910 poem, Poet of Our Race. I'm envisioning a woman in 1910. She's got kind of like a big white dress on and gloves and spectacles. She's sitting on a porch. It's kind of fun to think about. And she's writing a poem called Poet of Our Race. In this poem, the speaker is addressing Paul Laurence Dunbar, a Black author. Okay, now I'm envisioning a Black man in 1910, maybe wearing a suit. And his name is Paul. Maybe he's got a name tag that says Paul. I don't know if name tags existed in 1910 or not. In my brain, they did. And, what I'm realizing is it's called Poet of Our Race. I know Paul Laurence Dunbar is Black, and now I'm envisioning Maggie Pogue Johnson in her white dress. She's also Black. And I think it probably matters in this text because it's called Poet of Our Race, and I don't know, they mention that Paul Laurence Dunbar is Black, so that's probably going to come up in some regard. And notice I'm just using the tools to world make and to have an experience. Okay. Thou, with stroke of mighty pen. So I'm envisioning Maggie in her dress talking to Paul, saying, you, thou means you in old school English, with stroke of mighty pen, has told of joy and mirth. And I got to be totally honest with you guys. I have no idea what that word means. Mirth? No one uses that word anymore. But if I use the tool of defining, I know it's got to be positive, right? It's right next to joy. So I don't know, happiness, laughter. And I'm envisioning Maggie Pogue Johnson maybe bowing down, praising, giving the thumbs up to Paul, saying, in your writing, you've written about happy things, man. And read the hearts and souls of men as cradled from their birth. Now she's praising him again for Paul looking into the hearts of men and babies as cradled from their birth. I don't know where this is going yet, guys. I'm not trying to control the experience. I'm just trying to feel it. And I'm getting the vibe, it's like she thinks this guy is amazing. The language of the flowers, thou hast read them all. Now I'm envisioning Paul picking a dandelion and writing about the dandelion. Flowers, not just men. And even is that word I'm defining, that's the word even. And even the little brook responded to thy call. Now I'm envisioning Paul sitting down and writing about a little brook, like a little stream. His feet are in the stream, and I'm feeling the stream as well. And Paul is writing about all these beautiful things, humans, flowers, streams, and getting praise from Maggie Pogue Johnson. And guess what, guys? I had an experience. I felt it in my body. I can see it. I can hear what it's like to be in the setting I created. And that's a prerequisite for doing well. So I'm going to predict here. I'll talk a little bit more about this next week, but I always make predictions. So what states the main purpose of the text? To praise Paul for writing about men, flowers, and streams. To praise Paul for writing about men, flowers, and streams. I'd write that down. And let's go one choice at a time. To praise a certain writer for being especially perceptive regarding people and nations. That's exactly what I predicted. That feels like it's probably the answer. I'm still going to read the others. B, to establish that a certain writer has read extensively about a variety of topics. At no point did I visualize Paul reading at all, so it can't be B. C, to call attention to a certain writer's careful and elaborately detailed writing process. I did not picture his writing process. I mean, I pictured him writing some stuff down, but I have no idea writing process makes that wrong. And D, to recount fond memories of an afternoon spent in nature with a certain writer. I don't know if these Maggie and Paul ever spent time together, so it can't be D. Boom, it's A. This feels really easy to me, guys, once I've had the experience. Once I've had the experience and walked through the whole thing, the question should feel pretty easy. It should feel pretty easy. So, your turn. I will let you do this. Start with the question. It's a main purpose question. Read up here. Make a prediction and see if you can get to the right answer. We'll call it 1.5 minutes on the clock. If you haven't yet, make a prediction, go to the choices, see if you can get there. Okay, good. I'll talk about my The way I'd approach this question. So again, I'm reading up front. I'm thinking 1924. I'm thinking a poem called Cycle. I'm visualizing a cycle, like up maybe the sine curve, up and down. That's a cycle. Who's a citizen of these tribes? Okay. There shall be new roads wending. That word I've literally never seen before in my life, but I'm using defining and I don't know, getting laid down. There'd be new roads, a new beating of the drum. Hopeful, feeling hopeful up here. And then it changes. But under new sun's being, completing what night began, there'll be the same backs bending. Wow, that's kind of dark. And so my prediction would be to kind of feel the ups and downs of the cycle of being a human. That's my prediction. A, to consider how the repetitiveness inherent in human life can be both rewarding and challenging. That looks really good. I guess I picked two. I think that's probably the answer. I'm not done yet, but I guess I picked two examples where the answer is A. That was by accident. To question whether activities completed at one time of day are more memorable. No. To refute the idea that joy. No. To demonstrate how the experiences of individuals relate to the experiences of the communities. Not really. It doesn't talk about the experiences of individuals, really. So it is, in fact, A. Good. And I hope you had an experience there, and hopefully that felt a little easier than it has been. So I want to actually pull up one more set. I'm going to put a couple of them on one slide together. And these will be the last questions we do, I think, before we wrap up for the day. So I will present again. Okay, we're back. Last questions, two of them. Do them at your own pace. Try all the things we've been talking about. Let's see what happens. Okay, take another 20 seconds. San, love what you're putting there. I'll tell you why I swapped the order in a second. But take another 20 seconds to try and answer these questions. All right, folks, let's talk about these. I swapped the order because I didn't want another A, a third straight A in a row for the next time I teach this. So let's start with number 8, right? This passage, hopefully you're having an experience where it's kind of like go out into the world and rock, it's very hopeful. I really like kind of, nice. I'm visualizing like my dad saying, go out and experience the world. Really cool. So that was my prediction. To experience hope, the child will have the same accomplishments. I don't think so. To suggest that raising a child involves many struggles. No. To warn a child who'd faced many challenges throughout life. I don't think it's about the challenges. And to encourage a child to embrace the experiences life will offer. Yeah, it's in fact D. And notice, why am I crossing off some of these? I use a tool, which I'll talk more about next week, called Every Word Matters. If there's a single word in an answer choice that's inappropriate, that doesn't work, I'm taking the answer choice off. So to warn a child, it really isn't about warning. Like that word warn is not right. So I took it off. Cool. This one, Mansfield Park. Tom envisioning like a big mansion, and Tom's saying like, we're gonna throw this play on, and it's gonna be chill. No audience, no publicity. This is gonna be a chill and relaxed show. That's my prediction. So to offer Tom's assurance that the play will be inoffensive and only involve a small number of people, I think that's right. And then I'd go yes, no, sorry, every word matters for B. Not be performed in the manner he'd attended, that's not right. To elaborate on the deal that Tom lacks the skills, no way, lacks the skills isn't mentioned. To assert that Tom believes the group performing play will be able to successfully promote it, the word promote makes it wrong. So the answer is, in fact, A here. Good. And if you are getting these right and finding them easy, excellent. Hopefully these main idea questions start to intimidate you less. For the people in the chat who are mentioning about like anxiety around reading or tuning out, I would bet you don't have enough experience yet to feel really confident on the reading section. And my suggestion for you is to break down the reading section. Start with the main idea questions. Can you master every main idea question? It's the same thing every time. Read the question, read the text, have an experience, make a prediction, and get the answer. Right? It's not like these change. The subject of what you're reading about changes a little bit. The tools do not. Same thing here. And hopefully going through today's class, and as you keep practicing them, the main purpose questions start to feel a little less intimidating to you. And then next week, we'll look at the other types of questions. So let's see what those are. I'll give you a little preview of next week. Let me just pull that up. Where'd that go? Reading. Yeah, I'll show you this. Cool. Okay, so main idea questions, main idea. What else is there? Well, they're function questions. And there's not a whole lot different about this, guys. I am going to show you some specific moves to answering questions next week, but it really builds on the reading toolkit. Like I still would recommend reading everything by world making, by personalizing, parsing, all that stuff we mentioned. So there's function questions. And if you do a bunch of these, guys, you'll start to feel confident on these question types. And then it comes down to detail questions, right? Like specific details. What is true about mother? How does the Lord Chancellor respond to the crowd? And if you do a bunch of these, you'll start to feel confident on these. Then there's support a claim. And there's data. And then there's logically complete. So those are the question types. And next week, this is just a preview for what we're going to talk about next week, but I'm not going to teach anything radically different next week. I'll give you just a couple of tools to add on to what we're talking about here today. So I'll say one last thing, like if you can find a world in which you change your view about reading and start doing more of it and reading good stuff, I've seen lives changed, guys. I've seen people go from like on the verge of dropping out of high school to getting straight A's, getting a scholarship, and feeling like supercharged about life, just changing this one thing. I know it sounds hokey, but if you can start to read, you can start to connect to ideas, you can start to connect to your role models, you can start getting supercharged and really crush it academically. That's why I feel so passionate about this, guys. I like grammar, I like comma rules and all that, but reading is really at the core of how you interact with ideas and with other people. And if you can find a way to make that part of your life, I've just seen incredible things happen. So I hope that was helpful. I hope it maybe gave you a vision of what a path where you become an actually good and confident reader, what that looks like. And anything I can do to help, please let me know in the school community. I'm happy to answer questions and share resources there. Okay, cool. So Vishwak asks, what sentences should you look at when time pressured? I strongly believe you should not think about time until you know how to read. Those questions about timing, I think, are masked questions that are basically to, like, ignore timing. Just ignore it for now. If you're getting 780s and 800s when you're untimed, that's one thing. But time pressure is like the worst thing you can focus on to become a better reader. I would ignore it. Vishwak, I think you're looking for a shortcut, and there are none. There are no shortcuts to being a great reader. You have to have an experience, and if you keep practicing that, you'll get fast enough that you can finish the SAT in time with extra time. But you can't go from point A to point C without point B, and point B is work on your reading toolkit. Work on your reading toolkit. Yeah. And I think San mentioned it, the entire text matters, right? Like, you can maybe, Vishwak, get an 80% guess if you don't have a lot of time, but to be 100% sure, you have to go, like, notice, I'm sure some of you are like, wow, this is kind of going a little slow as he does these main idea questions. I'm modeling for you guys the full experience that it takes to be 100% sure to get them right. And then Vishwak, I'll answer this question, and then we'll call this a really good question. Do I think it's strategic to do the reading questions last? You should watch on the Scalar Learning channel my walkthrough of test 6. I do it in real time. I basically go in order until I hit a wall. That usually happens, I don't know, maybe question 18 or 20, because they ask so many sciencey things in a row. And when I hit a wall and I'm like, oh, I don't want to read this table again, I take a deep breath, and then I go towards the end of the test and answer some of the grammar questions, just to kind of like use it as a reset. I would not wait to do all the reading questions last at the end. It's just so much reading back to back to back. I would take a chunk of them out up front, then switch gears, and then come back to them. It's a really good question. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you all in the school community. Let me know what I can do to help. And we're back next week for our final reading session. I'll see you all then.